Hello, I'm Kay Burley and welcome to a special programme in which I'm joined by 100 women from right across the UK. We agreed you weren't just going to sit like that, ladies, didn't we? Thank you. An hour of live discussion and debate on how far we've come in the last 100 years and how much further we need to go for real gender parity. We're joined by a special panel to discuss everything from sex scandals, equal pay and feminism to male attitudes and whether other women sometimes hold us back. Oh, yeah. You can join in as well if you'd like via social media. We're using the hashtag 100women today. Do let us know your thoughts. Before we do all that, let's have a quick look back at the journey so far in 100 seconds.
What about this, ladies, for cutting bread in a hurry when those hungry youngsters come in for tea?
Everywhere suffragettes throw stones, shout, chain themselves to railings and resist everything, including arrest. Off to jail they go in their hundreds, there to endure hunger strikes, votes for women.
Mary's insistence on short skirts amazed many buyers until they reflected that girls in Milan and Minneapolis are now demanding what Britain already has.
The ladies not for turning.
Sweet dreams are made of these. Who am I to disagree? I travel the world and the seven seas.
Yo, I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want.
Girl power, woman power, just empowering women.
What you want, what you really, really want. I wanna. Who run the world, girls? Who run the world, girls? Who run the world, girls?
This is an unprecedented incident. In my 29 years of being a firefighter, I have never, ever seen anything of this scale.
Some of them men think they freak this like we
Fed up with not being treated the same, not getting the same amount of pay, just having to do two jobs at the same time. It's enough. Time's up.
Who run the world, girls?
This is going to be a good programme, let me tell you. Let's start off with Danny Cotton, who was in that video. She's with us now. Hi, Danny. You're a woman at the very top of your game, having been in the fire service for 30 years, I think I'm right in saying. How have you got to where you are?
I think persistence, having to believe in yourself even when you've got huge amounts of doubt and other people criticising you and not believing in you. And I think just by being determined and by proving that you can be a woman and do the top job and go through the ranks and you're as good as a man doing it. And actually, I think women bring different skills to leadership, and that's really important. And I think last year and the tragedy of Grenfell showed that it can be really good to be a woman and lead differently, because I really care about all the people who work for me in the London Fire Brigade.
What sort of challenges have you faced straight off the bat? Obviously, we'll go into more detail later on.
Yes, I think the challenges are that people still think that firefighting isn't a job for women, still challenging the sort of gender term fireman, and still not having people fully behind us. And I think that some of the media criticism there have been recently of me trying to discuss gender-neutral language and the animosity that's brought has made me realise how far...
So you want it to be firefighter Sam, don't you, rather than fireman Sam? And, you know, to bring it down to its lowest common denominator. What's wrong with that? Why shouldn't we call him firefighter Sam, don't you think, ladies?
It's just for me about inspiring young girls and the next generation of firefighters and giving all of our children, both boys and girls, the opportunity to do what job they want and not be restricted by, you know, people who have stereotypes.
Yeah. Let me introduce the rest of the panel, not only to our audience here, but also to you at home. With us is actress Michelle Collins. Everybody recognises Michelle, of course. Labour MP for Ealing Central and Acton, Rupert Hock. We've said hello to Danny. The consumer champion, that's what we're calling you today, Kate Hardcastle. Does that work?
That works.
Works for me. And Sandhurst's first female commander, Lieutenant Colonel Lucy Giles, who got a round of applause last time I said that. Rupert, can we come to you? It's less than, 1919, I think, when we first welcomed the first woman MP, Astor, who we saw in that video, Nancy Astor. How do you think things have changed for women in Parliament in that time?
Yeah, I mean, I think the culture has changed, but the pace of change sometimes feels glacially slow. So, I mean, when I take people on a tour of the House of Commons, I was doing one this morning, you come through an arch that's been there since 1099. So, I mean, from 1099 to 1919 is a long time. And it took up till 1918 for people to recognise women are intelligent enough to put an X in a box every 5 years. So, I mean, I'm very proud to say I'm part of the most diverse parliament ever. 1 in 3 MPs is now a woman. I think it's the gayest parliament ever, the most BME parliament ever. But, you know, we could still go a lot further on things like disability. And 1 in 3 is not
with
the
the building
same...
you've got at the moment. It's hopeless.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's... I mean, even
it's
in
crumbling,
1990...
basically, isn't it? You
Yeah,
have
it's
to, all have to
falling
move
down.
out quite
I show
soon.
them that as well, all the holes in the ceiling
Yeah.
where it's literally, you can see it caving in. But, I mean, it's not enough to just pat ourselves on the back and say, job done, because 1 in 3 is not the same as 50-50, which it should be if it reflects our population. So, I mean, I think in 1997, when we had 101 Labour women MP elected in the tide of Blairism...
Was that Blair's babes?
Yeah, that's them. Yeah, some of them are still
I didn't
around.
like that phrase particularly, did you? No.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 45 years old. I couldn't be a babe ever, but...
OK, we're not doing age, OK?
Okay,
We're
let's
not
not
doing
go
age.
there. But I mean, the point is they had to convert a lot of toilets into women's toilets because it just wasn't there before. The infrastructure, the whole setup of it is like a gentleman's club. The sort of way that we refer to each other, I'm the Honourable Lady for Ealing Central and Acton, it's really bad to refer to someone by their name. You get really slapped down and frowned upon. So this Victorian play acting that we have in the House of Commons, some of those structures, you know, I mean, tradition is good, but, I mean, some of them for the sake of it. And then also recently we've had debates on things like baby leave, because MPs who have kids while they're in there, I mean, I did all that before I was elected, there are these sort of things like they vote for you, they work for you, that they sort of count, they audit every time an MP votes. So colleagues of mine who've had kids, they've been rated by The Sun as the laziest MP in England or whatever. And it's because you have to go through a physical lobby, you know, the strictures and structures that you have to do. There should be some ways around that, because it's not that they're slumming it, you know, it's for legitimate reasons.
You talked about a men's club. Can I bring in Lucy Giles? You're in one of the most male-dominated fields in the whole world, aren't you? I mean, how have you risen to the top?
Well, I don't come from a military background. I joined the army straight from school via university, and I was encouraged by my friends to join the army and do a thing called the Officer Training Corps. But the thing that attracted me with the army was because I enjoyed working with the people, and I did have a foray into looking at joining the media, but the people weren't the same. But don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Yeah, no. But no, seriously, it was the challenge. It was travel, it was doing different things and so many different experiences. So I joined with that culture. I didn't really notice, in a way, that I was in a very stark minority. There were a few things that
When you say stark minority, I mean, what
it's
were
about,
the percentages?
There's just over 12% women in the British Army.
Wow.
We're looking at, increasing that to 15% by 2020, that's our target.
That's not a lot, is it? What is it in the
no,
fire
but
service?
we could improve.
7% women.
7?
In the London Fire Brigade, less than that in the UK Fire Service, about 3% in the UK.
And what are you doing about it?
We're doing lots of positive recruitment. We're starting a new recruitment campaign tomorrow for International Women's Day, and we're specifically trying to target women and talk about the role of a firefighter and how different it is now, and, you know, how many different skills you need, and that women make great firefighters.
As far as your industry is concerned, I mean, there's a lot of women, isn't there, but as actresses, but they're treated differently to men?
Yes and no. Obviously, you know, I can't... It's very difficult because I can't play a guy, so we're obviously not up for the same roles. I think equal pay definitely comes into it, obviously, as we all know, in the past. And you know, I remember doing... a job, it was a promotional job with an actor, quite a well-known actor, I won't say who he was, and he was always talking about money, as men tend to do. They tend to talk about money a lot, and we sort of don't. I don't know if it's because we're British or because we don't really talk about money, I'm not gonna... And I just listened to him, he was bragging about how much he was getting, and I sort of went, what? And just quietly went back and got onto the phone to my agent and said, do you know he's getting this? And she said, what? So then she went, we were in the same agency, but with different agents, and got my money upped. I do think... I mean, of course it's different, because actresses, you know, we go off and it's generally us that, when we have children, we take maternity leave. The men don't normally take the maternity leave. So, and then it's harder to go... It's when you go back to work, it's you know, I run a women's group, and it's very difficult for women who have... And statistically, I think when women have children, they go back to work, and generally they don't get back to the position that they were in when they left. It's tougher.
It's true.
For women. And it's also, you know, God help you if you're an actress and you get to 45, because your career will really change. It would totally change then as well.
Quick thought from UK before we bring in our audience. Do you find, I mean, when we think about entrepreneurs, we don't necessarily think that men do better than women, do they?
Well, I think there's a really interesting idea around the word entrepreneurs to start with, because sometimes it can be masking a challenge that we've got in the business economy, and that is a lot of ladies who, as Michelle just mentioned, you have a child or you get to a certain point in life, maybe you're caring for an elderly parent, and you have to almost invent a business for yourself to find the hours and find the working environment that suits you. And as part of my business, I do a give back of 20% of my time, and I mentor those businesses, and I speak to predominantly the women that run them, and they don't always choose to be like that. They're just doing everything they can to earn the money they can in the hours that they've got available. And I think there's so much that we can do. But, I mean, you can see in the boardrooms around the world, so much more needs to be done. And I will tell you for sure, a balanced business run by a balance of people will be a better, more profitable business.
OK, let's bring in our audience. Thank you for that. Kelly Maloney is here with us. Hi, Kelly. Delighted that you're with us today. Thank you. You're a former boxing manager, of course, aren't you? And a campaigner on transgender and diversity issues of late. What's your life experience taught you about equality?
I think you definitely get treated different as a female, as a person who's lived in two genders. As a man, I had really different roles and different expectations of me. And, you know, I walked out of boxing and I came back into boxing as a female. But the level...
And what differences did you see?
Well, a lot. I'm just saying I gave back my licences because the level of respect I had as a female was totally different to what Frank Maloney had. I actually had to remind a couple of officials that I hadn't had a brain transplant, I just modified my body. So it's very hard.
And you did feel so strongly that you... Was it a conscious decision to give up that, or did you feel that you had no choice and they would have been taken away from you anyway?
Well, I think it's very hard, you know, if you're in the boxing world, unless you're with the elite promotional setup or with a TV company, it's a very hard business to be in. And I felt because of what I'd achieved as Frank, I wasn't going to put myself through that stress, that bother. I'd rather live a much more peaceful life and do other things.
Do you think it's because you're female, or do you think it's because you're transgender?
A little bit of both, because some sections of the female community do not accept us trans women as women. I mean, I listened to the lady MP there talking about diversity, but there are no trans people in the Houses of Commons.
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, on some of these things, we're really slow.
And it's very hard for a trans person to get onto even to an all-women's party group these days. There's a lot of...
Employed an advisor.
She's been sacked. She's been sacked.
Already? When did that happen?
She left today, didn't she?
Didn't last long.
Yeah.
Oh.
Sorry?
OK.
She left yesterday, yeah.
Oh, she left yesterday, apparently.
I'm actually
Breaking news here on Sky.
I'm going to apply for the job.
Yeah, you should go for it.
So how much further do we need to go? Obviously, we're hearing what's happening in the House of Commons, but you are being... I mean, you come on programmes like this. We've seen you on Big Brother and the like, haven't we? And you're blazing the trail for transgender women.
We are getting there very slowly. But where it's taken a women to 100 years since they got the vote, you know, we're a long way off being accepted fully in females' community properly, I believe. You know, there are a group out there, I think it's called Women's Place, who are so anti-trans, they do everything to stop us. And they criticise us, and I personally am at the moment having major rows with them on my Twitter account, so I've just decided to block them.
It's the best way forward. Now, I'm just going to do a quick show of hands, ladies. We were going to do this at the end, but I want to do it now, and then I want you to think about it, and then we're going to do it again at the end. And the question is this. We've come a long way in 100 years since some women, not all women, some women first got the vote, women who were 30, I think I'm right in saying, over 30, and also were married. Yeah. What? So how much longer, how much further do you think we need to go? How much longer do you think it will take for gender parity globally? So that's a question that we're going to ask you. Anybody think it's 10 years? Anybody think it's 20 years?
Until it's equal.
What about 50 years? 100 years? About 100 years. OK, that's what our audience is saying. Be really, really interested to hear what you think about that at home. How long do you think it's going to take until we have gender parity globally, according to the World Economic Forum? Do get involved at home. Tweet us using the hashtag 100women. Let's move on to what is perhaps one of the biggest issues for women, the fight for equal pay. There was a groan in the audience. In our exclusive Sky Data poll, 70% of both men and women surveyed told us that they believe men are paid more for doing the same job. 70% think that men are being paid more for doing the same job. What does our audience think? What do you think? Do you think that men are generally paid more for doing the same job? Anybody want to offer a view on that? Lady at the back there. Yes, madam.
I don't think necessarily, I mean, particularly in the industry that I work in, currently work in social services, and I previously trained as a primary school teacher, so I've worked in education as well, both very female-dominated environments, and I think particularly job for job, on the same pay scale, you are paid the same, but I think particularly things that are viewed as women's work, teaching, social care, cleaner, admin, secretarial, receptionist, are generally paid less than jobs that would perhaps be quite similar, that are generally dominated by men, like the difference between what a cleaner's paid and the difference between those who collect the dustbins. Kind of a similar field of work, but the pay difference between the two is quite staggering.
Anybody else in the audience? This lady here in the middle, please, with the black jacket on. Absolutely, madam.
I work in the IT industry, and I can positively say that male and female, we get paid more or less the same, which is encouraging. And I think that many more young women should come forward to work within the IT industry.
OK,
so it's a growth industry. Come along, girls. Yeah. Come along and join.
Fantastic, fantastic. Michelle, you were telling us about a story where you found that the man was earning significantly more than you. Was it sorted? It was sorted out?
It was sorted out,
Do you
yes.
think it's still the issue?
Yes, I do. I mean, you know, I suppose I've been fortunate enough that over the years I've had leading roles in dramas, and as I said, I don't really talk about what I'm getting paid. It's something I like to keep quite private, but maybe now is the time not to keep it private. And as I said before,
what do you think about the women from the BBC who've come out in force and said, look, this is what I'm earning?
Well, I think it's brilliant. We need to. This is when now times are changing and we need to start talking about it. And also it's solidarity, isn't it? I think women, if it's just one woman, you're really scared to go and complain about, well, I've just found out they're getting paid more than me. And I think women are frightened that they might get the sack but what's happening now is because we're all together, it's solidarity. If we go in as a group, then we are much stronger. And it's a bit like, you know, there was the open letter that 70 female writers wrote to the BBC about how they felt that female writers were underrepresented on TV, and there were 70 of them, and it was brilliant because it's so much more powerful when you've got a group of women as opposed to one. And I think it's fantastic that times are really changing. We're not going to be embarrassed anymore to talk about what we're earning. I'm certainly not going to be, because obviously we need to be, the world is becoming so much more transparent.
Absolutely. Kate Hardcastle, I mean, it was the 1970s. Barbara Castle, the Dagenham women. It is illegal to pay women less than men. It is still happening.
And I've even had it said to me when I found out that a colleague in a similar role was being paid significantly more, well, you should have asked. So, yeah, that was the sort of commentary I used to get being one of the only female board members in organisations. But I think it's about us building bridges and not thrones. I think it's about not looking after ourselves quite as much as looking after us and the future generations and being the true baton carriers that were ahead of us. And that is going to involve some uncomfortable conversations. I'm more than happy to mentor, support any person within the workplaces I've been in and be completely transparent about the pay that I've had, the benefits I've received, and help them negotiate a better deal. But we shouldn't be putting the onus back when we know that naturally we're very different anyway. And we know that test. We know the test that the man looks at the interview sheet and says, says, if there's 5 or more things I can, if there's 5 or less things I can do, I'll apply, and we look in, or can we do 10 out of the 10 before we apply? So it's not in our nature always to do that, and therefore the employers themselves need to be far more responsible.
Lieutenant Colonel, men and women are paid the same in the army?
Yes. We're all there to do a particular job, to serve our country, and it doesn't matter if you're a male or a female doing that job, you get paid the same.
Same as the fire service?
Yep, it's brilliant, and that's one of the best
Another round of
things.
applause.
And that is great, because it means that as a man or a woman joining the fire service, you are going to get the same pay, and you don't have to fight for it. It is your right, and you don't have to ask for it, because that is what you're going to get paid, and the whole thing. I think that women are sometimes shy in coming forward, and I think sometimes when women get to a certain job or a rank, if they've never got there before, then they kind of in some ways feel grateful they're there and then don't provide the challenge, or because they're isolated. And sometimes a woman's far less likely on a board to say to the other guys, well, what are you actually earning? Because they don't want to highlight themselves because they are one in a group of many men. So I think it is time. The honesty bit is great. I think if we are supporting each other and being honest, and right across the piece from public to private sector, I think now is the time for us all to stand together, because by doing that, we are building the bridges for the next generation, and we're there. We should be role modelling that behaviour. It's so important because people look to us, and if we're not doing it, how will a young girl coming through or a new young apprentice ever have the courage to do it?
MPs pay the same?
Yeah, I mean, our basic salary is the same, and it's very transparent and open what we're paid. But I think there was a report recently that showed that with all the outside earnings, men earn more. So they often will have a second job lawyering or something like that. Whereas I think with all these arguments, we've got to look also at the workplace. Why is it always the woman's fault for not asking? If you're in a job where it's macho men in suits, and if you stay all the hours God sends, then you're a good employee, that is not conducive to going home to do bedtime, you know, the sort of thing I'll be doing tonight. Whereas a man wouldn't, you know, men are carers too, they're parents too, but the onus is often on the woman, isn't it? So,
Yes,
I mean, I think we need to look at our workplaces, because these structures and cultures are designed by men for men, aren't they?
You have a creche, don't you, in that?
Actually, yeah, there is a House of Commons nursery, but then there's issues about between nursery age and school age. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's
I thought you were going to do a gag about it being the chamber then, so I'll do it instead. Ladies,
No,
who's got a view?
than
Who's got a view? Lady here, yes, please. Just hold a second and then we'll get the microphone towards you. There we are.
Thank you. I think it's picking up on something Rupert said as well. There's other factors at play, and often it's the woman that takes on the caring role. I was, in 2004, I was at the top of my game in a marketing career, and then bang, my child was born very, very disabled, and I had to give up my job and cared for her for 12 years until she died last year. And now I'm trying to re-enter the workplace, and the colleagues who were at the same level as me 12 years ago have gone on, you know, they're in the stratosphere, and I'm now at a completely different level. So
what can you do about that?
Sorry?
What can you do about that?
Well, I mean, in terms of carers, acknowledging that it is often the woman who becomes the carer, and it's not just caring for a child, caring for a disabled child, and where I physically couldn't go back to work, caring for an elderly relative. I mean, I'm very much sort of the sandwich generation. We have children in school and we have elderly relatives. Our parents are living longer. And how are we supporting the invisible women who have had to step out of a career and be at home and provide for free a caring role?
OK. Anybody else want to jump in? The lady there with glasses, beautiful red hair. Just hold on one second while we get the microphone to you. There we are.
One thing that sort of hasn't really been touched upon is the idea of, you know, equal pay in the workplace is brilliant. But how does that transfer to smaller businesses as well? We've all talked about, you know, acting, the military, things like that, and having sort of a consensus on equal pay. But as someone that works for a very small business, you know, is there anything that can be done to ensure that that carries across to those small businesses as well?
Kate, do you want to come back at that?
I think small businesses often, in my experience, can be a lot fairer. They're more personable, and therefore they can feel the responsibility to you because they've got that relationship. If I was going to start beating up some of the people in business, believe me, it would start in some of the bigger ones. You know, having some of those major UK brands have their boardrooms not equal, in balance, in any way, in any diversity, and yet be prepared to sell to that person every day makes my blood boil. So, you know, I don't actually think in the main small businesses tend to be the unfairest.
OK. If you want to get involved at home, of course, do tweet us. I've got my phone here in front of me. I can read everything that you'll have to say. Keep it clean, please. Use the hashtag 100women. Graham Wetton has tweeted. A very good afternoon to you, Graham. The biggest and best influence on my life was my mum. I miss her guidance and advice every day, but I can still hear her voice in my head. Who was the biggest influence on you, ladies? Very quickly.
My grandmother brought up my mother during the Second World War, having lost her husband, who was a Canadian Royal Air Force pilot when she was 6 months pregnant. And she's been an absolute inspiration. She's 95, still alive, still fighting fit, and amazing woman.
Yeah, I've got a mixture of them. I think what got me into Labour politics was probably Neil Kinnock, when he used to always lose those elections.
Was he a feminist?
He was... Yeah, I think that he... Yeah, feminist is also...
Definitely my mum. I was brought up by a single parent, my sister and I, my mum. She's constant inspiration. She went back to get a degree when I was 13. And she's just amazing, and she taught us how important education was, to read, how important books were, and to go out and do what you really wanted to do.
Dame Anita Roddick, who was kind enough to give me great advice and told me, don't think you're small. If you think you're small, spend the night with a mosquito in your bed and you'll know about it. You can make a difference.
Obviously, my parents, but I've also been influenced by a pretty impressive OC when I was in my first tour in Bosnia, David Shoesmith.
OK. So it's really important to be very influential on your children's lives, is what we are gathering from our audience. Let's bring in Natasha Jonas, should we? You are a mum. Of course, you're also an Olympian, and you are a boxer. Did one of those have to give or bend until it almost broke when the children were growing up?
Now that she's in her own routine, the professional boxing side, she's in you know, that just comes with it. She's in her own routine. She goes to nursery. I've got massive support from my family, which helps with the babysitting and, you know, the times I have to spend away competing.
Do you feel guilt as a mother? And I wonder, do men feel the same sort of guilt? I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. I mean, I was a single mum, and I often went out on assignment, and so I had to make sure that, well, I actually just left him under the stairs with a slice of bread. He was fine, he was fine, he was fine. Do anybody else? I mean, who feels that it is this lady here? Do you find it is more or less of a challenge being a mother as to being a father? Yes. Just wait for the microphone. There we go.
Yes, I do feel guilt sometimes. I have an international job. I've worked in international roles for 10 years, so I travel a lot. And it's when the children say, Mummy, when are you coming back next time? Please don't go away. I got stranded in the snow last week, 27 hours to get back from Northern Ireland.
Wow.
So, yeah, it can be difficult, but at the same time, you have other responsibilities, and so it's balancing those responsibilities.
OK, let's bring Alex to pledge. Alex, you're a successful tech entrepreneur. Tell us what happened, though, to you, because quite often we were hearing about which sort of businesses might be more supportive when it comes to being pregnant. Not all businesses are very supportive when it comes to being pregnant. What was your experience?
So I think, so I had my first child in 2015, shortly after raising about £4 million for my technology startup. And it wasn't particularly welcomed by the investment community, is probably the nicest way to say it. And you find that quite difficult because I think, as in sport and as in acting, there's only just over 2% of investment goes into female-led businesses, or at least in 2016. And I think the relationship between investors and founders is broken in the sense that there is no traditional hierarchy of like a HR function or the kind of employee-employer relationship. And so when that breaks down, you have nowhere to go. And I think that you can see that happening with actors and in sports, and it definitely happens in tech. because we haven't had that Me Too moment. If you look at technology, no one's really come out with these stories, and yet I hear them on a daily basis. I was on my way in here today and I got a call from one of the girls that I mentor, and she'd been in an investment meeting with some very senior investors that if I named their names, you would know them, and she was mocked while she was trying to raise investment for a company. And I think this happens all the time, but we have nowhere to express it. And to do so is to whistleblow, and to whistleblow it is to risk your credibility. And so you keep silent. And I think until we get some mechanisms that go beyond the individual, for example, like the FCA regulating venture capitalists with ethics and discriminatory measures, that when they're raising that fund or getting that fund approved again, they are looking at some of these factors. We have nowhere to go for that outlet, and I think that needs to come to the front.
OK, not everybody thinks that the older generation are a good influence on us. Caroline has tweeted me this afternoon. Hello to you, Caroline. Must we always have to pay for older generations' mistakes? Some of us don't want to burn our bras. We just want to be paid the same as men for the same job. Let us know your thoughts. You can tweet me directly if you would like to, at Kate Burley. Let's move on to one of the hot topics in this centenary year, sex scandals and sexism. Oh, yeah. Harvey Weinstein, the male-only dinner at a swanky London hotel where hostesses were encouraged to dress provocatively, and, of course, the Me Too campaign. All this prompts the question, have men really changed their attitudes towards women? You're going to absolutely be surprised at this result. Let's ask the audience, first of all, before I tell you the result of this poll. Do you think men have changed their attitude towards women as a result of sexism, sexual abuse, and the way it's been highlighted in the media over the last 3 to 6 months? Yes? Do you think men have changed their attitudes? No. You don't think men have changed their attitudes? Put your hands up if you think that men have not changed your attitudes. So I'm going to say that's about 60%, so 40% if you think that they possibly have? Who thinks that men have changed their attitudes? Some men, some men. Do you want to see the results of our poll? Have a look over here, ladies. Here we go. 3/4 of men say they have not changed their behaviour or attitudes towards women as a result of what we've seen. Panel, who would like to start? Oh, you're shaking your head in the middle.
I genuinely don't think a lot of men think they have to, because what's the sanction? For the majority of men, unless you are in the position where you're, in a high-profile job and getting caught, for a lot of men, nothing actually happens. They don't lose out in the job world, they don't lose out anywhere, and I think that there is nothing that's set in stone. I mean, there are some great people, there's some great men out there who behave brilliantly and are role models, but for a lot of men, there is no encouragement, there's no support, and they're seen as weak sometimes if they do change their behaviour.
It's not going to change overnight, though, is it?
No.
I think it's educating young men at a very young age, I think, to respect women and to treat women as equals and getting them when they're very young. I mean, men do make jokes about, oh, I'm not supposed to touch you now. Oh, I better be careful, I'm not. And think it's really funny.
Yeah, no names, no backdrop, but I went to quite a swish restaurant with one of my colleagues recently, and a very, very senior Conservative politician said, come over here and let me sexually harass you. Oh, I'm not supposed to say that anymore.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Come here while I bash you around the face a little bit. I mean, how ridiculous is that? Do you still find that in the corridors of power?
I think probably in the world of politics, people will think twice. Because if you think about it, the expenses scandal, sort of, as a result of that, we've now got procedures in place for claiming expenses, whereas before that, when Michael Fallon said that times are different now to 10 to 15 years ago, I think what he meant is you could get away with more 10 to 15 years ago. Men will do what they can get away with. Whereas now we've got a system for financial impropriety. Do you know what I mean? I was elected in 2015. I'm never going to claim for a duck house or a bath plug or a Mars bar, because I'm very aware it's all going to be published. But up until then, there was no transparency in all that. So, I mean, if that's what it took to have a proper system, I think it was a good thing. It was, unpleasant to hear about it, but it was a necessary thing.
I think as men are quite balanced, and I think there's a few things to be said here. I mean, I've got my dad who set up a rugby league team just so his daughter could play, because there wasn't one that the female PE teachers would let me play in, and then the male managing directors and CEOs who recognised my talent and got me to INSEAD Business School did all that brilliant thing. And then also being in a factory floor at a very young girl, begging people to take topless posters down. I've really, truly gone on each side of this. But working with young men in schools and colleges, one thing I do understand about behaviour, and having son as well as daughters, is that sometimes their behaviour is almost like a pack thing, and they have so many confidence issues to not behave.
To do role models as well, isn't it? They need role models.
The way that they're enforced to behave almost sometimes. And it's an education process as well as a just, well, let's just shove men in one camp.
I mean, I see these statistics and my heart drops.
Yep.
Because we are trying so hard
I couldn't
to
believe
change
this when
the
I saw this.
culture.
I said, are we sure? Did we ask that question and this is what they say? Unbelievable.
We have a network called the Sandhurst Sisterhood. And in that network, when this all sort of happened a few months ago, it did raise a few skeletons from the closet of people particularly in the 80s and in the 90s who'd had some bad experiences. And I remember following the traffic. And what was interesting, it wasn't necessarily just my reaction. When our senior leadership got to hear about it, and they did, they were devastated. They were genuinely devastated because there is no excuse at all for any inappropriate behaviour.
What are they going to do about it?
Well, we've got policies in place, but more importantly, because that's just paperwork, isn't it?
Yeah.
What we've got to do is we've got to change the culture from the bottom up.
Yeah.
And certainly, if you look at what we're doing at Sandhurst, in the last 3 years, we've integrated all our training. We've got men and women training together, training as we fight, so that we can stop what inadvertently we're doing, which was creating a bit of misogynism by having women trained separately.
And the top down, can I just say? Not just the bottom, the top down.
Absolutely.
Aisha Hazarika, who is a political commentator and previously a speechwriter for top politicians, has tweeted, "Hi Aisha, saying, does the Me Too campaign, the hashtag, mean nothing when 75% of men have not changed their attitude towards women despite the Weinstein and President's Club scandals?" Keep your thoughts coming in on that, if you would. Audience, this lady here with the glasses and the green top, just here, come this way, guy. There we go. Thanks, guys. Just wait for them. There we are.
I'm really disappointed to see those statistics because I think men have such an important role to play in helping this movement. 100 years ago, when women first got the right to vote, there was a league called the Men's League for Women's Suffrage, and those men used their positions of power to help women get the right to vote. And I would love to see a similar movement now, a movement by men that could help women get into positions of power in politics and in business. Right now, we have 32% of MPs that are female. In senior leadership roles in business, it's 22% women. So most of the decision makers are men. If we could use that energy, that power to help this cause, it would make such a difference.
Lady over there in the red. Just wait for the microphone. Thank you, madam.
Hi, I think I work in this field and in the corporate world. And I think what's happened in the years since I started working this in the 80s, where we thought it should be 50% in everything, and so I don't know why that didn't happen. I think what's happened is a lot of intellectual recognition. Everybody's got diversity committees for everything. But actually, when you scratch the surface at a beliefs level, we haven't tapped into that. We really haven't got many of the most senior people understanding it at a gut level until sometimes they experience it, sometimes when it's their daughter who has passed over. Because I was just talking to a chief executive before I came in, and he was saying, I'm appalled that people have been saying to our women, you're off to the International Women's Day, is that to get your nails done? And he was a classic, yeah, it's usually the knitting club that they get, but he was a classic person who, you know, had a daughter who was just going into work, and he was so aware.
You know what, though? I think it's fair to say, ladies, I don't know how you feel, that, you know, it's not just, you know, we're looking at men in that poll, but it's not just men. Sometimes I find that women are not as supportive as they might be to other women. And there's a great quote that I try and mentee quite a few young girls, and I always say to them, there's a special, it's Madeleine Albright, actually, who was the former US Secretary of State, and I always say there's a special place in hell for women who don't support other women, and I think we need to remember that. Let's bring in Chelsea J. Chelsea, you are a model and a campaigner, and you've had this experience as well.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, we all have, and I think it's so important that
we take responsibility as females for the fact that, you know, this movement is about us, but we also control it. It's really important. You know, it's a really dangerous culture, and it's too normal. It's too normal. You know, we go on social media, and the comments you read from women to other women, and it's about what we look like. It's even about how people parent. They'll be ripped apart for how they bring up their children. You know, we buy into it as well. You know, magazines are telling us that, you know, I'm apparently not a real woman because I'm not curvy. You know, but I know obviously curvy women get it as well. You know, I'm told that I can't age as a woman. You absolutely can't age, but damned if you try to fix it with cosmetic surgery, because then you're fake. It's a constant domino effect, and it's so sad because we're so savage to the people that know the argument best. We're all women, we're all going through it. So without sticking together, I mean, imagine if we all did stick together, didn't put that hate out there, we would literally be the living embodiment of the Spice Girls, basically.
Kelly, I mean, have you found that women have been supportive to you?
Yes, I've been very lucky. But going back to the sex scandal and things like that, I mean, I think it's men of a certain age, because obviously I was at the top of my career in the 90s too.
But we made sure it was across, you know, across the ages.
Most of my business had to be done in strip joints or lap dancing clubs. And in some cases, to get some contracts signed, and I won't mention which promoters they are, I actually had to provide women hookers for them to sign the contracts, to get certain deals done. So I think it...
How do you feel about that now, having done that?
I try not to think about it now, if I'm honest. But it was the world I lived in. It's an unfortunate, you know, it's a world where, like, it's sport. I mean, the England women's football team done really well in the World Cup, yet one of the FA officials came out and said, oh, well, we'll forget about them. Now they've got to return home. They're just mums and wives. But, I mean, don't men footballers turn home? Aren't they husbands and fathers? You know, so it's... It is a thing about... I think it's certain men in certain little clubs.
Yeah, OK. Well, we'll come back to you in a second, ladies, if you wouldn't mind. As I said, do let us know what you think. We very much appreciate your opinion. Apparently, we are trending on Twitter at the moment, ladies. That's nice, isn't it? Yeah, I know. Hashtag 100 women. Let us know what you think. OK, let's move on to our final part. We're whizzing through, aren't we, with our discussion about feminism and royalty. Oh, yeah. Last week, Meghan Markle announced Prince Harry is a feminist and said women don't need to find a voice. They have a voice. They need to feel empowered to use it, and people need to be encouraged to listen. So, who here considers themselves a feminist? Anybody who doesn't consider themselves a feminist? Lady at the back with the pink top? Yeah. Why are you not a feminist?
I don't necessarily would class myself as a feminist because I genuinely believe that we are equal. So I don't believe that a woman should have better rights than a man should have better rights than a woman, because we are all the same. And I personally haven't experienced any gender, anything against me for being a woman. It always has been equal in my life, so I think I've been pretty lucky.
OK. We're going to come back and get some more thoughts from you in just a second, ladies. I have to say that I have a very close male friend who describes himself as a feminist. So men can be feminists as well as women. But what did our Sky Data polls say? Here we go. There we go. Are you a feminist? Only 2/3 of people asked said that they were a feminist, whereas around a third said that they were a feminist. Are you a feminist? 34%, 2/3 saying no, they weren't. So that you're not really reflective, are you, here, ladies, today? What do we make of this poll, and what do we think? Yeah? Hold on. Oh, you've got your mic on, yeah. Wait.
Yeah, I think you don't have to necessarily identify as a feminist to care about women's rights. So actually, if you embrace the term...
So you're saying we shouldn't be using labels?
I think we shouldn't give up the struggle for women's rights because there are issues around the word feminist or feminism.
Lady there with the lovely bow in her hair? Or is it sunglasses? It's sunglasses. Sorry. It's dark.
I worry about what feminism means to people.
What does it mean to you?
Well, it means equal rights for men and women. It means equality in its absolute. So for me, who the hell wouldn't be a feminist? It literally makes no sense.
Lady here on the end with the floral top. Yep, you.
Hiya. Yeah, I think that the term feminism is still used in a negative context, and it really shouldn't be. To me, being a feminist or into feminism is just being empowered to be. You're a woman, but you can be whoever you want to be. Enjoy it, embrace it. It's it's nothing to. People automatically think, oh, okay, it must be into burning bras and doing marches. It's not at all. It's basically, giving everyone, empowerment to just do your own thing. It's 2018. Just in equality for everyone, really.
Lady here with the black top on, gold bracelet. Just there. Yeah. Yes, you.
Hi. As a small business owner and coming from down in Devon as well, which is a little bit further from here, I'm also in an industry where it's very male-dominated, and with children, having mummy guilt and seeing all you lovely ladies up there and what you're doing, and also how we need to embrace and empower other women. I have been through some things personally, but I'm very cautious of the fact that, we need to stand together, and there shouldn't be a male or female. It should be very equal. It is hard to be a feminist because as an owner of a business, you don't want to be seen as, and it's hard to be a man in our world. And I've got 5 sons, 3 my own, 2 of my partners, and I want them to all feel that, they should look up and aspire to be the best person they can be.
Ola Shennery, one of our sports reporters, has tweeted to say, great news on women's cycling. The OVO Energy Women's Tour to offer equal prize money to men's Tour of Britain. Race prize funding going from €35,000 to €90,000. We've only been on air half an hour. To me, when people ask me, am I a feminist, in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up, you would either be a feminist, where you would burn your bra, or you would be feminine, where you would, talk about lipstick and curls in your hair. I'd like to describe myself as a feminine feminist. That's how I see myself. What about you, ladies?
I think we almost have... It's almost become a little bit jaded, the word, and it has too many connotations.
It needs a rebrand, Michelle.
Yes, it does. We need to reclaim it, as they say. Yeah. And I think, my daughter said, she's a 21-year-old clever girl at Bristol University, and she said, well, I don't want to be defined. Why should I have to define myself? Yes, I believe in I'm inequality, so does my partner, but... So, now I think #MeToo, #time's up, time for change. That's what people are saying more, and maybe that's the way we should be going. And I do think it's, someone talked about women's lib earlier and burning your bra, and I just can't believe it's quite comical in a way, isn't it? And I think, I'm a feminist, I'm totally a feminist, but sometimes I do, we shouldn't condemn somebody. Bjork decided she wasn't going to be a feminist. She's not a feminist. And a lot of people condemned her, and she's the most individual artist that we have, and a very independent female woman, and it's up to her that she doesn't want to be a feminist.
I think in this... Sorry, I was just going to say, I think in this day and age, particularly with social media, it is very word-oriented. And yet, if you go back to the original movement, it was deeds, not words. And I think we cannot do...
Which is what the slogan was, ladies, I'm sure you know, for the suffragette movement.
We can't do anything but be grateful to all of those before us. I mean, yes. I revisited everything last night, and I was looking even... The advertisements for jobs used to be in male columns and female columns, So much progress. So utterly grateful for that. But maybe now it is, because there are so many fragments of feminism, time to just start looking at the deeds.
Yeah, the first thing I asked David Cameron in the House of Commons in 2015 when I was first elected was, would he call himself, because you're not allowed to refer to people by name, you're not allowed to say you, that's really bad in the House of Commons. So would he call himself a feminist? And he said, well, if it means equality for women, yes, of course I am, because 30% of my cabinet are women. Like, I'm no statistician, but 70-30 is not 50-50, is it? But, I mean, the point is, it is laudable aims to be associated with. I think people that have given it a bad press, associating it with dungarees and bra burning and spare rib and all that, you've got to look at who those people are propagating those arguments. And it's usually the sort of people who don't want women to lift themselves up at all, people who don't...
Let me bring in the ladies in uniform, if I may. Do you have male feminists in the army?
Absolutely. My husband's serving, and if we're defining feminism as wanting an education and a profession that's equal, then of course he's a feminist. I think it's quite simple, really. But interesting, for the various places that I've gone to, you see places where it is massively unequal and huge problems in different parts of the world where we serve and we try and make a difference.
Yeah, I think the Fire Brigade, there are fantastic men in my organisation who are very supportive of wanting to make the Fire Brigade look more like the community we work in.
Are they in the minority?
I don't think so, no. And I think that now when people talk about things that are sexist, there's far more people who are ready to stand up and say that's not right. But I just think as women as well, we sometimes need to stop apologising for wanting that to happen.
Absolutely.
I think we are quite guilty of feeling, you know, as though we have to, you know, it's really awkward, but can I? And I think that we just need to be proud of where we've got to, but actually continuing the fight together and involving men, because men are the biggest advocates when they are supportive, and then it doesn't become a battle. And I think that I'm definitely the uniformed services, the military. I think that, you know, people are professional, they're there to do a job, they're there to serve a community, and that's really important. And people understand that if you're there and doing that together as a team, there is no space for people to be different. We have to be together and working.
And I think as well, it's about empowering people to step in and call it out if something is going wrong. Have that voice and be able to, you know, call it out if there's inappropriate behaviour or if anything's going wrong.
And have the strength to know that you have
and you've got the
system behind you to
100%.
support you. Of course, you can get involved at home if you would like to use that hashtag 100women. Lilana, hi, Lilana has tweeted me to say, I wish we had this 100 women trending 365 days a year. All of us need to keep empowering ourselves daily and be supportive worldwide, be inspired not only by famous women, but also women in your communities and families. That's fabulous. Also, very, very keen to hear what you think. I've not heard from a lot of men today. Don't be frightened. We don't bite. We just want to know what you think as well. And thank you to all of you who are feminists. This morning, I was chatting to our editor-at-large and presenter, Adam Bolton, who I've known for 30-odd years. And at the end of a chat I had with him, he said, if you could change one thing to make women's lives better, what would it be? I thought that was a great question. I thought maybe you ladies might have a view on that. The lady with the beautiful bangle on, just here. There we are.
Me?
Yeah.
I think it's important going forward to actually give women, all women, a voice, because I think sometimes this gets lost in a conversation. Like the conversation we're having today is quite homogenous when we talk about women. I think that's something that perhaps we could talk about a bit more, where not all women's voices are sometimes being heard, particularly women from minority groups or people coming out of developing countries.
OK, well, so moving towards the end of the programme, ladies, so let's get these dancers in quick fire or questions or whatever you want to do. Lady here with the pink scarf.
I think for me, it's about the fact that when you've reached a senior position in a corporate world or the business that you're in, you then have an excuse potentially that you're too busy now, you've made it to the big time. And I think one of the messages and legacies we can leave for our children, our daughters, is to have more of those senior women mentoring, starting from the school and working at a much younger age, so that we give our daughters the confidence to have those voices, and also the sons to respect those daughters in those classrooms.
One more. Lady here at the front.
Yeah, I think.
Hold on one second. There we are.
I think it's quite interesting how one of the things that would change everything is helping. I was thinking of maybe going back to the consciousness-raising groups that we had in the 70s, but maybe what we need now are men's consciousness-raising groups, where when men are saying, oh, I have daughters, I want things to change, why were they not indignant for their wives? Why were they not indignant when their mothers tell them stories? My mother-in-law told a story about being addressed in a big group of people with qualifications qualifications, and they went round doctor, professor, and Julie.
Oh,
in a big sort of
I keep saying that,
group.
don't I, today, ladies? But it's so infuriating, isn't it? I think my dad was probably a feminist as well. He's brought up two very strong-minded girls, certainly. Thank you very much indeed for your thoughts. We're going to come back to you in just a second, ladies. But remember, at the top of the programme, we asked how far away we were from gender parity worldwide. You remember that? Put your hands up, ladies, if you think we can achieve gender parity in the next 50 years. You can join in the next 50 years. OK. OK, do you think we might reach gender parity worldwide in the next 100 years?
It's a difficult question.
OK. Does anyone think it will be more than 150 years before we reach gender parity? What do you think? Well, according to the latest figures from the World Economic Forum, gender equality is still more than 200 years away. 200 years away. Still an awful way to go then. Quick thought? That'll do.
I was excited about the future. Now I'm not. Thinking I'm not going to be around.
You knew, didn't you?
Well, no. Well, I might win the bet for being closest to the target, but I'm you know, I think that's a sad state of affairs.
Disappointing, yeah.
Okay.
But we've done a lot in 6 months, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to
keep that momentum going. It could be good.
Sadly, the hour's whizzed by. Joining the debate via social media using the hashtag 100women if you would like to. Remember, on Sky News, we have a day of coverage to mark International Women's Day, which is tomorrow, of course. And before that, coming up at 5:30, we'll be reflecting on some of the issues raised in this special programme. Some of our panellists will be staying with us for that, and our most senior woman at Westminster, Beth Rigby, will be with us as well. So if you've got any thoughts, use that hashtag 100women. And don't forget, you can watch this programme again at 8 o'clock tonight. For now, though, thanks to our panel, Michelle Collins, Rupa Huck, Danny Cotton, Kate Hardcastle, and Lieutenant Colonel Lucy Giles. And, of course, to our studio audience. And to you at home, thanks for watching.